we close this book out. I don't think we're ever going to get to the end of this book, and yet here we are. I'm really excited. And so as we get into this last chapter, we're going to deal with vows, vowing things to God. And we're going to see how God expects a vow to be honored. Because we're going to find he expects the vows to be honored. Vows should never be made in a nonchalant manner. It should never be something that we speak not having meant. Mean what you say what you mean, uphold what's been said. And God is going to throw a number of blocks, I would say, to prevent people from either making vows or establishing that they're dead set on making this vow. And you'll see what I mean as I get through. And when we get to the last couple verses, we're going to see what's like kind of like well, let's see, I threw it in my notes. I don't remember the exact word that I used. It's I guess I didn't write it down. It's kind of like a, what the word? Give me one sec. I'm okay if we're a little late. I guess I didn't put it in there. Can't think of the word for the life of me. It's something that you throw into a contract that's a stipulation. Can't think of the word for the life of me. If anybody can... Thank you, clause. I know it's in there because I remember writing clause down. I just couldn't find it. But there's a couple little clauses in the last several verses that are kind of just thrown out there, and you'll see what I mean when we get there, that are pertinent not only to the Israelites of the day, but to us. Now let's get into the text. I'm going to start off with just an example. I was once a part of a church where I had a pastor who liked to lie. He's a liar, I love Dave, woo, uh-oh, but, and he just liked to lie. I had a pastor, he was a liar, and there's not another word for it. I wish there was, and there's not, he just lied. And I got kids, and you know what the worst type of lie is? It's not the big lie, right? It's not the big lie that's man, they're up to some real no good. The worst lie is the lie that was just not even worth lying over. Right? It's the lie that doesn't even make sense. Like, why are you lying about that? Because that tells me that they've gotten so comfortable in lying that it's second nature. When somebody lies about, man, they stole. I was going to get in trouble. I understand that. But when they lie about stupid stuff, I can't even think of something off the top of my head. But I remember my kids would lie about things. I'm like, why? You wouldn't even get in trouble for that. What was the point of lying? Because it has become so second nature to them that it's just a part of who they lie. They've learned to not tell the truth. And that's kind of how this pastor was. He lied and he lied and he lied over things that weren't even worth lying about. And my biggest problem with the lying is by and far God said not to. As a matter of fact, Jesus said it like this: let your yes be yes and let your no's be no's. This pastor once lied to me about teaching. I was set to fill in for him and teach for him while he was going to be out of the country. And I was really excited because, it's always exciting to fill in for somebody. And I remember I found out the week they were leaving that I wasn't teaching. But I didn't find out from him. I found out from somebody else that he had asked to teach. And for me, I was like, excuse you? Like... I'm teaching. No, I'm teaching. Well, yeah, so-and-so said, I'm teaching. Well, he told me I'm teaching. And in my mind, the wheels are turning. I like to play chess. I'm trying to figure out, what's going on here? So I go talk to the pastor, and he just lied to my face and played stupid like he never told me I was going to fill in. And I was like, I just lost a lot of respect for you. Okay. And I started thinking, like, well, what was the purpose of that? Was it to see if we'd have a fight in the middle of a church service over who's going to teach as we're both going up to teach? What was the purpose of the lie? You're the pastor. If you just told me that, hey, I don't want you to teach anymore, I want this person to do it, you're the pastor. Would that have hurt my feelings? Yes. Would I have gotten over it? Yeah. Like, I'm not the pastor. Like, dude, if you want somebody else to teach, you have the prerogative to say yes or no. But to just lie about it, and to put both of us in a position to be pitted against each other, it's divisive. But it was the lying. Again, it comes down to the simple yes is yes, no is no. Let your words be what they are. I love what my father-in-law says. Your word is all that you have. The greatest way you could offend my father-in-law is lie to him. Because your word, that's who you are. And if you can't uphold your word, what do you really have? I mean, I feel like that's common in humanity, right? Your word is binding. We actually use that in legal terms because your words are binding. When you make an acclamation with your mouth, you can actually bind yourself in a legal manner. Words have weight to them. Power in life and death is found in the tongue. Words aren't just words. As a matter of fact, words have the ability to tear people down or to build them up. That's the idea behind words have power of life and death in them. Many of us tear down our kids by the way we speak to them. We tear down our kids by putting down the other parent, not realizing we're breaking them, we're harming them, we're damaging them. But we also build our children up in sharing how much we love them, sharing with them our being proud of them for their many accomplishments that we deem as stupid. But hey, for a 4-year-old, that's a good job. For a 4-year-old, that's the world. What we speak holds weight, and when we make vows, our vows are to be kept. This is one of the reasons Jesus said, let your no's be no's and your yeses be yes. Don't just make vows willy-nilly. Don't just make vows like, well, let's back up to when I was a youngin', and many of you will feel me. Swear to God. You ever said that? Did you know that's an oath that you bound yourself to? To swear is to bind yourself. Even to promise, I promise, is to bind yourself. You're making a vow. Chapter 27, these vows are concerning the land of Israel, particularly concerning the Israelites and making vows to God with what God has given them. In verse 1 and 2, it says, again Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the sons of Israel, and say to them, when a man makes a difficult vow, he shall be valued according to your valuation of persons belonging to Yahweh. In the New King James, it says, when a man consecrates a vow. And in the NASB, it says, when a man makes a difficult vow. Both of those are legitimate terms. So when we think of the word consecrate, typically we're thinking of the Hebrew word kodesh or kadosh, to be holy. And this word doesn't necessarily mean that, but it can mean to be holy, because once the vow is made, a setting apart takes place. But it's not the same as holy. Even though it is holy, it's just not that same word. And in the NASB, it uses the word a difficult vow. And the idea behind this, it's a vow greater than the ordinary vow that would be proclaimed. And so when somebody makes a vow above and beyond a typical vow is the idea, hence a difficult vow or a consecrated vow, something different. When someone makes a different vow, it says that you're to evaluate the value of the persons being offered to Yahweh. Now, in this first vow, we're going to see this is the vowing of a person. And we see this play out. We actually saw this on Sunday nights when we were in 1 Samuel. Remember Elkanah had 2 wives? We're going to just dismiss that part because we're not talking about why you're not supposed to have 2 wives. But he had 2 wives. One of them was named Hannah. And Hannah was barren. And remember, the other wife would constantly mock her, and she was just a torn woman. To be barren, I mean, even in our society today, to be barren is to be broken. Doesn't mean you're broken, but ladies, have you ever tried to have kids and you can't? I watched my wife when we couldn't bear kids for years. She was just a broken woman. And then we had Ezekiel. But I mean, I remember seeing how tormentous that was to her. And that's when I realized, like, dang, like for a woman, that's a big deal. And so when a woman was unable to bear children, I mean, it would, especially in this culture, you were considered broken to the umph degree. You were considered cursed. And so she cries out to God at the temple and she vows, Lord, give me a son and I'll give him back to you. It's a vow. I'll give him back, Lord. Now imagine that. You ask God for a child because you can't bear kids. And you say, God, if you give me a child, I'll give him back to you. And the idea is not, oh, dedicated. No, I'm going to give him to the temple. It's out of my hands at that point. That's a weighty, difficult vow, right? To part ways with the child that you bore. And she did it. Remember, she has the baby and she says, let me wean him first and then I'll give him over. And the weaning process was between the ages of 3 and 5. And then when the weaning process was done, I mean, that'd be like us taking Ezekiel now, dropping him off at church and say, I love you, son. I'll see you next year. For the rest of your life, this is your new home, but I'll see you when I see you. Can you imagine that? But that's the vow she made to God, and she upheld her vow. You know what God did for her? He opened her womb and blessed her. She had multiple children after that. And every year when she went up to the temple, she went to her son, made him a piece of an article of clothing and gave it to him. And that was still her firstborn. That was her boy. But he was dedicated to God. He's the first of the established prophets of Israel. The first book of Samuel, that's his title. But that's the idea of the vow. Now, this is where the vow gets tricky, because when a person was offered, the idea is they're offered and then they're to serve in the temple. That's where the vow is completed. You know, you're not going to actually sacrifice the person like you would an ox or a goat or a vow of that sort, and we'll see those coming up. But the person would serve in the temple. It gets tricky here because there was only a certain type of person that could serve in the temple. You guys know who? The Levites, more particularly the Aaronic priesthood. They were the only ones that were able to serve in the temple. And if you weren't part of the priestly line of Aaron, I mean, you weren't allowed to. So what happens if, let's say, I and my wife are trying to have a child, and we're of the tribe of Judah, and I make a vow to God, I'll give my firstborn to you, Lord. Well, what do I do? If we then conceive, my son can't serve in the temple legitimately because it would be a violation of God's law. Or even, let's say, my kids now, me and my wife are in a pickle and I make a vow to God that I'll give my kids up to you, Lord, if. Well, how do they serve in the temple? How are they supposed to serve for the glory of God when they don't have the right blood? Because that's really what it came down to. You have to be of a specific bloodline in order to serve in the priesthood, temple-wise. Now, this is where God's grace pours in. We're going to see in the preceding verses, like 3 to 7 or 8, God makes an allowance for those who aren't of the tribe of Levi, who aren't of the Aaronic line of the priesthood, the priestly line. And he's going to make a redemptive clause so that someone can make a vow and pay a redemption price for that purpose that would go to the treasury of the temple in place of the person. So essentially, what we'll see here, I'm going to read verses 3 through 7 real quick. If your valuation, so now they're going to value the person vowed. He says, if your valuation is of the male from 20 years even to 60 years old, then your valuation shall be 50 shekels of the silver after the shekel of the sanctuary. Or if it is a female, then your valuation shall be 30 shekels. If it be from 5 years even to 20 years old, then your valuation for the male shall be 20 shekels, and for the female 10 shekels. But if they are from a month even up to 5 years old, then your valuation shall be 5 shekels of silver for the male, and for your female your valuation shall be 3 shekels of silver. If they are from 60 years old and upward, if it is a male, then your valuation shall be 15 shekels, and for the female 10 shekels. And I'm going to just stop there. So when the vow is made, now you have to give the valuation of the person vowed, especially if they're not of the Aaronic line, because the whole idea is the vow is going to the temple. Remember, the temple is the embodiment, the representation of God's presence. And so whatever they're offering, it's going to the temple. And so now the offering has been vowed for whatever you're vowing. Some people would even just vow because they loved the Lord. Lord, I'm giving my child up for you. I want my kid to serve. But your kid can't serve. Or I want to do it myself. I'm 60 and I'm an old man. I want to serve God. Like Kurt, you know. I love Kurt, you know. Well, God put a clause in here that allowed people to be able to make the vow, keep the vow, because the idea was worship, right? This is what it comes down to. This is an act of worship. When you make a vow to God, the idea is you're worshiping Him with your action. You're worshiping Him with the intentions of your heart. That's the idea here. It's like when we do worship physical musical worship, or even the teaching of the word, or even when like people come in and they clean the place. Those are acts of worship to God. When we go out and we serve the homeless, or we do the pizza and prayer, those are acts of worship. Whether you realize it or not, you are worshiping God in your time and in your presence and in your service to him. These are acts of worship. When you read God's word and you're spending time with him, that's an act of worship. When you're listening to godly music in your car and you're worshiping, that's worship. When you're sharing God's word with somebody, these things are acts of submissive worship to the Lord. And that's essentially what's taking place here. People that want to serve the living God, they want to do something. I see it all the time, right? People always come up to me, what can I do? What can I do? And, usually it's like, when I throw out ideas, people, that's not their idea of worship. So they kind of like, But the reality is that is worship. And if we can't worship at the most basic of levels, you're never going to do worship on the grand level. I'll tell you that. And that's where God's going to work his way up to, because we're going to see that people are going to retract their worship because they're going to realize, it's too weighty. But it comes at a price. Anyways, what I like about this value system, as he's valuing the vow, is there's a distinction made between males and females. And I think that's really important, because we live in a culture that thinks men and women are equal. And we are equal to degrees, and we're not equal in other degrees. But men and women are distinctively different. We're not the same. We've come to a point where we'll actually accept a girl saying, I'm a guy, and the guy saying, I'm a girl. You know what the craziest thing to me is? When I was a kid, that was a diss. To call a dude a chick was like the biggest slap in the face you can give to somebody. Now it's like, ha. It's like, what? I'm a girl. Oh, thank you. What? Bro, well, what's another name I could diss you with? Give me some. I don't know. But, it's the oddest thing, because now it's like, and we use words like cis women, cis man, trans. I don't really know what those mean. Dude, you got a penis or a vagina? Which is it? If you've had surgery, what were you born with? That's what you are. You can't just chop it off and think you're good. Like, dude, you're a dude. You're a penisless dude. That's all you are. You're not a girl. You could act like a girl. You could talk like, you can't even really talk like a girl. You can try. You could try to look like a girl. That Adam's apple pops through pretty clear, though. You could try shaving that down, But those masculine hands are still popping through. You're a man. It's not meant to be mean. It's not meant to be aggressive. It's not meant to beat people up. It's just the facts of reality. There is a distinction between men and women. Now, what's the distinction? Men are worth more than... No, I'm just kidding. But listen to what I'm saying, though. Are men worth more than women? I'm asking you guys. You sure? Somebody said something over there. So are men worth more than women? It depends on what we're looking at, what we're asking of, right? Yes and no. Intrinsically, men and women are equal. Intrinsic is the value you're created with. You're endowed by your Creator. The value of our humanity is equal. When we stand before God, we're equal. We're not worth more or less. But in the nuances of life, men and women aren't equal. If you needed a brick wall built, would you rather have a team of women or a team of men? Women, I'm going to ask you that. What would you rather have, a team of men or a team of women? You can say women if you think women. What would you guys rather have? Huh? Well, does it matter? Would you rather have a team of men or a team of women? Even if they're skilled women. Let me ask you this. Who do you think can go the distance when it comes to bearing weight, men or women? Now, can a woman break the barrier and keep up to degrees? Yeah. But nature's basic biology is men are built to go the distance in laborious work. You're going to want a team of men. If you have robbers breaking into your house, would you rather call a dude over or a girl over? Well, why not a girl? Why can't a girl come die for your family? You guys don't count. I said, would you rather call over? If there was a male in the household, would you rather confront the intruder or have a male do it? And if you're one of those women that would rather confront the intruder, that's okay. Or if there was a man available, would you rather have the man do it? What's fair? The reality is if it really happened, you're going to want the dude to go down. Hey, go, go. Because that's the natural instinct. You'll stay back with a 12 gauge or something. If they come in, we'll shoot. But the reality is that's part of the makeup of humanity. The man is the provider, protector. That's what we do. That's why we go to war to go die. Well, women are in the military now as of recent. But the strongest militaries in the world consist mainly of men. Now, don't get me wrong. The Israeli military is sick. And they have a lot of women because they don't have a choice. And God blesses them in a unique way. But it's okay. There's nothing wrong in that differential. That's not a bad distinction. If there was a child who needed nurturing and love, would it be better to have a man or a woman? A woman. A woman's going to show nurture that a man will never be able to show a child. But if that kid needs discipline, would you rather have a man or a woman? A man, because a woman will never be able to exert the type of discipline that a child needs. I don't care how bad of a woman you are. How bad, I almost said that word. how bad of a woman you are. Like, it just won't happen. I've known some tough chicks, and the kids turn out horrible. The mom slap them up, and no matter how hard you try, it doesn't matter. Because there's a certain fear that males give to a child that a mom can't pour in the same. It's not there. My mom has slapped me up as a kid, and I laughed at her. And then she said, wait till I call your dad. Mom, I'm so sorry. Please don't tell Dad, please. My whole attitude changed. You could be the baddest chick on the block, but you can be the meanest pit bull woman. It doesn't instill the same type of fear that a man brings because it's part of God's nature, how he created humanity. There is a distinction between men and women. It's not a bad thing. If you needed a homemaker, would you rather have a man or a woman? I don't care how clean you are of a dude, you will never do a house like a woman. You just won't. You could be the cleanest, the sweepiest, the doing the dishesest, and you could be a great cook. You will never make a home as homey as a woman. It will never happen. Because there is a presence, there is something that a woman brings to that environment it's a God thing. There's nothing wrong with those distinctives. So when we talk about value, the question is, well, what are we valuing and for what? So in this, the value is for working, for laborious work in a temple. That's how they're going to value the value of the labor of a person. So when we see the valuation, males are worth more, females are worth less. Why? Because in nature's order, a male can go the distance further in laborious work than a female can. Hence, a male from 20 to 60 is worth 50 shekels in redemption, whereas a female is worth 30. Male from 5 years to 20 years is worth 20 shekels. The female is worth 10. From 1 month to 5-year-old, the male is worth 5, the female is worth 3. And 60 and up, the male is worth 15, the female is worth 10. It's not saying that women are worth less. It's just they're worth less with laborious work. We want to talk about moving and doing and going the distance and having to put in a hard laborer's day work. The men are worth more. That's the blessing on you guys, especially on the father, because I got to pay less for the female. Got to pay more for the male. But the idea is the vow is being made, and since the person cannot work that vow, they are redeemed by the price, and until the price would be paid, it would be given to the temple, it would be put in the treasury, and it would be for the purposes of the temple. So the value is based on the nuances that surround the circumstances. For somebody that would say males are worth more, that males are better, that this is a sexist kind of deal, I want you to notice that they're categorized by age also. If it was just male versus female gender-wise, there'd be one price for males altogether, and there'd be one price for female. But the fact that they categorize it by age shows that it's the ability to work and the ability to provide. So just note that. When it comes to sexism, God is the leader in women's rights. Just know that. For you ladies that have been told before that you live in a, what's the word that they use? what's that word that they use to talk about men being a misogynistic religious system? The misogynistic white man's religion. First of all, it's a Middle Eastern religion, so it has nothing to do with white people. The gospel was in Africa long before it was in Europe. Long before it was in Europe. The gospel is a Middle Eastern faith. Jesus is a Middle Eastern man. Abraham was Middle Eastern. God brought this to the Middle Eastern people. And God is the one that has always elevated women from the very beginning. From the very beginning. So much so that in creation's account, God says that he made man and woman in his image. He didn't say, I made man in my image and then woman in his image. I made male and female, and both they I made in my image, he says. That means intrinsically he puts males and females on the same standard before him intrinsically. So just know that God, the Christianity, our faith is the leading, or I should say the leaders when it comes to women's rights. Women, do you guys enjoy your education? You can thank Christ for that. Christianity is the leading cause of women having been educated in the world. So when you go to the Middle East today, women are still uneducated, many of them, because they're not allowed to learn. It was Christianity that brought about schools that allowed women to learn. You like hospitals? Christianity brought about hospitals. Nurses, women are some of the people that worked the hospitals in the early hospital days. I mean, Christianity is the leader in these things. So just note that, because you will come across people who try to rebuttal our faith and say, it's a misogynistic faith. It's not. But God also makes the evaluation based proportionally and accordingly. But, verse 8. Then it says, but if he is poorer than your valuation, then he shall be placed before the priest, and the priest shall value him according to the means of the one who vowed. The priest shall value him. Now, I particularly like this, because if somebody makes a vow and they're too poor for the redemption, right? They want to worship God. They even made a vow, but they don't have the necessary funds to pay that vow to redeem the person back. The Bible says that the priest is to take that man, the one vowed, and value him according to what he's able to pay. That way he can still worship. Did you know this was one of the big issues with Jesus in the temple? Remember when he goes and he flips the tables and he sets the doves and the whatever they got up there free, and he throws the money changers over and he's whipping and chasing and doing. Everybody thinks that it's the same idea like the bookstores in churches today. If Jesus was here, he'd go flip those bookstores. No, he wouldn't. No, he wouldn't, because that's not even on the same level of what Jesus did. The reason Jesus went in and did that is because these guys were monopolizing worship. What it was when you are coming to worship, let's say you're one of these poor people, you just want to worship the Lord. And so you're coming, you have your perfect little ewe lamb, it's spotless. And as you're coming to worship God, you're stopped by a bunch of priests. And they say, what is that lamb that I'm coming to worship? Well, let me see it. They'd inspect your lamb because they were required to by the law. And then they'd look at your lamb and say, it's not acceptable. This is a flawed lamb. You have to buy one of ours. And look, we have these pre-inspected lambs here. You can buy one of ours for an adjusted price because it'd never be, you can't just trade it. This is, even though it's spotless, it's dirty. It's not clean. It's not spotless. Even though, no, but it is. Well, we're saying it's not. We're the priests. So you can give us this lamb and then pay us the price of a regular lamb because that jack up the price inflation, especially when it's worship time. You could have one of these. And so they would make worshiping God difficult. They'd make it a stumbling block so that worshiping God wasn't joyous. It was a burden. That's why Jesus is flipping the money changers. That's why Jesus did what he did. When there's bookstores at a church, they don't say, well, if you want to worship here, you got to come through our bookstore first. You have to buy a Bible from us. Now, the day a church does that, let's flip those tables over and let's get crazy. Till then, they're just resources. There's nothing wrong with it. And usually when people get all blah, blah about it, it's like, you got heart issues yourself. That's what this is. You have a heart issue. Otherwise, I find nothing wrong with them. I've bought many books from bookstores at churches, many Bibles, many gifts, things that are good. Why is it a bad thing to have resources for people to be able, well, they should be free. Well, that would be nice. Gas should be free. Like, my mortgage should be free. There's lots of things that I think should be free, but that's just not reality. Like, if they were free, you know what people would do? They'd all run in there and ransack that store every single time they filled it up. The church would go broke trying to fill it up. So I get it. Like, and all they do is offer resources, and I think they should offer them at a price where they're not like jacking up, making all kinds of money, But if they're selling resources at a fair price for people who are looking to know more, then right on, go for it. I would hope one day that we could open up some kind of bookstore to have commentaries and Bibles and things that people need so that they want to learn. Because people always ask me, where can I buy books? Where can I get this? So I would love to be able to provide that for people. If we could do it for free, that'd be better. I just know that's not realistic, But, so just know that that is what's taking place here. So when this poor man comes, he wants to worship God. They value him at what he's able to pay. And then he's able to make that redemption and thereby worship God. Verse 9. Flip this page. Now, if it is an animal of the kind which men can present as an offering to Yahweh, any such that one gives to Yahweh shall be holy. So if somebody makes a vow to God to give an animal that is able to be sacrificed, once you offer this animal in the words of your vow, that animal is now consecrated. It's holy. That's that kadosh word. It's set apart. Once you make that vow, that animal is God's. You can't retract it. It is His. You know how we get, right? When we get in a feeling of the Spirit, or we get moved in some way and we make some kind of vow. Lord, I'm going to do this for you. That's the idea. Lord, I'm going to start doing this for the church. Lord, I'm going to... And then you don't. That's the idea. God says once that vow is made, once you offer this animal in your word, that's His. You cannot retract it. In verse 10 it says, He shall not replace it or exchange it, a good for a bad or a bad for a good. Or if he does exchange animal for animal, then both it and its substitute shall become holy. So now they've had a change of heart, right? You know how it is when God blesses you, right? Has anybody ever been blessed by God? What's often the reaction from somebody who loves the Lord? You want to bless him back? Oh, Lord, I'm going to do this. God blessed me with this awesome, awesome cow. Lord, I'm giving this to your holy name. And then, you have some time to think about it. Like, that's a really good cow. I'll give you another cow, Lord. Not that one, though. That's a good cow. God says, you can't do that. Once you vow that animal, it's His. And if you want to give him another one, now they're both His. They're both consecrated. And here's the issue. If you break that vow before God, what do you think God's going to do? He's not going to break His vow, but He's going to strip the blessings. Right? That's the idea behind don't be making vows that you can't uphold, that you're not willing to uphold. Now, he mentions you can't exchange it good for bad or bad for good. So God puts a little clause in there because it may be so that as God bless me, I see, I don't know how, well, it's like one cow per cow. I don't know. You say you got a flock of cows, or I don't know how they're a herd of cows, and you got like 15 newborns, right? And you pick one that's, it's all right, and you want to give it to God for Him blessing you. And you say, look, Lord, that's a nice cow and all, but I can do better than this, Lord. I can do better than this. I want to give you better. Because there's the rarity. Some people actually want to give God better than what they're actually giving. You know how it is, because sometimes when we give God, we just kind of like, oh, Lord, here's like the leftover thing. And you look at that and realize, you know what, God, you've been so good to me. Shame on me. I'm going to give you better, God. God says that stays His, and whatever the better you bring. But the reality is that was put in the clause of, I've given God something really good, and I want to take it back. And Lord, how about we give you this one instead? You ever done that with like your kids? You accidentally give them like the best of whatever it is you might be giving. You're like, I'm going to take this back. Here, take this one. God says you can't do that. And if you do that, it's going to come at a price. And it's a price I promise you don't want to pay. So in this sense, he says they both go to the Lord and they both become holy. Verse 11, if however it is any unclean animal of the kind which men do not present as an offering to Yahweh, then he shall place the animal before the priests. The priest shall value it as either good or bad. As you, the priest, value it, so it shall be. But if he should ever wish to redeem it, then he shall add 1/5 of it to your valuation. So if something is offered to the Lord that is an unclean animal, an animal that is not permitted to be sacrificed, let's say a donkey, right? Because donkeys couldn't be sacrificed. They were considered unclean animals. If a donkey were to be sacrificed or offered up as a vow, he says the priest shall evaluate it and they could pay that price. But what would happen is they wouldn't pay that price. That donkey would just stay with the priest, and it would be a forced labor kind of deal, right? Because donkeys are good labor workers. They're able to pull, they're able to do. And it could be different types of animals. But the idea is you might offer it to God and realize, I want it back. God says, okay, you can redeem your animal back. Because it's not going to get sacrificed. The sacrificable animal, once that's offered, that's gone. You don't get that back. That's offered up to the Lord. The animal that is considered unclean, you could redeem it back with 20%. So whatever they value, because they evaluate the animal so that you know what it is. And if you decide you want it back, let's say it's a $100 donkey, it's probably a terrible price. But now to redeem it back, it costs $120. So now you take that $120, you give it to the priest to put in the temple, and you get your donkey back. Now that was put there as a deterrent, because who wants to pay 20% above what your donkey's worth? The idea is, don't make the vow then. Don't make the vow. You know, God isn't forcing anybody to vow anything. This is a free will deal. So when we say we're going to do something, do it. If not, then here's the price for taking it back. That's the idea here. Don't offer it. Nobody, when I was studying this, a couple came to my mind. In the New Testament, there's this couple named Ananias and Sapphira. And in the early church, people would sell tracts of land, they would sell possessions, and they would come to the church and bring their gift to the church and offer it up, and they would live like in a commune, and they would all work together and eat together and live together, and it was actually pretty cool. I don't know how that worked, but good for them. I don't like the idea of it, but cool. They did. That's what they did. And this couple sells all that they own, and they got a considerable amount for whatever it is they sold. And it says that they kept part of the price back. They brought it to the apostles' feet and says, here's everything for God. They're doing this. They're bringing a vow to the Lord, and they vow everything. And when they do, Peter looks at the man, the woman goes off to do something, and Peter says, the Spirit of God tells me that that's not true what you just said. You say you gave it all, right? Yes. Isn't it true that you sold your stuff for such and such a price? Yes. Well, why have you conspired? Why have you lied to the Holy Spirit? Peter tells Ananias. He says, for this, you're going to die. And as he says these words, Ananias, whether he has a heart attack, a stroke, an aneurysm, we don't know. He dies on spot. The men drag him out, bury him. His wife Sapphira comes back. Sapphira, have you sold your land for such and such a price? Yes. Why have you conspired with your husband to lie against the Spirit of God? The God's Spirit told me what you guys actually sold it for. And he tells him, when it was yours, you could have done anything you wanted with it. You didn't have to offer it to God. It was yours. But because you're taking it as if I'm giving everything to God when you're actually holding back, he says, now you're going to die too. And where your husband was buried, so will you be. She dropped dead on the spot too. And it says fear fell into the church. And the idea was basically don't make vows to God, don't lie to him, and not uphold the vow and keep the vow. And don't be lying to God. They died for it. I wish God would do stuff like that still, but then we'd probably all be dead, But, there should be a fear stricken in us. What's yours is yours. God's not making you do anything. But be careful when you promise to do something for the Lord, because when you make that promise, you're held to that promise. Well, that's Old Testament. No, because in James it says the same type of thing. When you make your vow, you have to keep your vow. Therefore, just don't make vows. Just let your yes be yes and your no be no. Be a man or a woman of your word. But if you make a vow, you are bound to that vow to keep it. Unless it's a vow of something to break God's law or his will. But at that point, that's going to be a funky one. But I already read through 13. Verse 14. Now if a man consecrates his house as holy to Yahweh, then the priest shall value it, either as good or bad, and as the priest values it, so it shall stand. Yet if the one who consecrates it should wish to redeem his house, then he shall add 1/5 of your valuation price to it, so that it may be his. So now, the offering up of the house, and people actually do this today, where they'll make a vow to God, Lord, I give my home to you for whatever purposes, for whatever uses you wish. And then God calls or asks you to do something with your home, and you're like, not that, Lord. Yeah. Well, in this day, you couldn't just do that, because when you made the vow, Lord, you've been so good to me, I want to give my home for your work. The priest would come and they'd evaluate your house. What was the purpose of the valuation? Again, so you couldn't back out. You made the vow, they come, what's the house worth? This is what it's worth. Now let's use it for the things of God. I want my house back. Okay. Say it's a $100,000 house. Add 1/5 and you can redeem your house back. So now your $100,000 house, you have to pay $120,000 to get it back. Again, the idea was to discourage people from making vows hastily. You want to worship God? That's good. Worship God. But don't make a vow to worship him and then back out on the vow, because God is going to hold your feet to the fire. Verse 16 going forward, he's going to deal now with vowing land, tracts of land. Because we remember that when Israel came into the land was divided up and allotted to specific tribes and peoples and so forth. In verse 16 it says, again, if a man consecrates to Yahweh part of the fields of his own property, then your valuation shall be proportionate to the seed needed for it. A homer of barley seed at 50 shekels of silver. If he consecrates his field as the year of Jubilee, according to your valuation, it shall stand. I'm going to stop there. He says you shall valuate the land. So when a piece of land is offered up, right, you've been given a tract of land, and now you want to vow it to God, again, for God's purposes. These were acts of worship. That's how you got to think of all this. Again, things are done a little differently today, but that's the same concept. And so the tracts of land would be used for things like grain, for barley, for harvesting, for wheat, for cereal, for whatever it is that they would grow. And that's the idea. And what you're saying is, Lord, I'm going to give this stuff for the work and the purpose of your temple, for your services, and so forth. That's what it's for. So the priest would come, they'd evaluate the piece of land that you're valuing, whether it's all or a portion, and they'd value it according to what it produces. Now what's interesting here is in verse 17, it says, if he consecrates his field as the year of Jubilee, according to your valuation, it shall stand. And if we backed up, it mentions 50 shekels for a homer. Now the common homer weighed out at a shekel for a homer. That was the weight. So when it mentions 50 shekels for a homer, the idea that's being put in play here with verse 17 is it's expecting that tract of land is vowed from Jubilee to Jubilee, which is how many years? 50 years, right? The 50th year is the year of Jubilee. Hence 50 shekels for a homer. So it's counting a homer for each year. That's how much. So it's including the full weight of 50 years. So when a vow was vowed in such a case, it would go for that long. Now, why only 50 years? Why wasn't it a permanent vow? Because the tracts of land couldn't be permanently delegated out. They had to go back in the Jubilee to the original owners. We're going to see God's going to put a clause in here that maybe be careful vowing your land. But if you do vow your land at the Jubilee, the owner gets his land back with the case of some stipulations here, and you will see. Verse 18. He says, if he consecrates his field after the Jubilee, however, then the priest shall calculate the price for him proportionate to the years that are left until the year of Jubilee, and it shall be deducted from your valuation. And so again, the idea is from Jubilee to Jubilee, but if the land is dedicated, let's say, in the middle of 25 years, then you shall calculate the valuation for whatever that land produces for those 25 years. A homer for a shekel. So it'd be 25 shekels per homer to count for those 25 years. Does that make sense, or did I confuse you guys? I feel like that makes sense, yeah? Maybe, maybe not. Talk to me afterwards if you don't get it. I'll explain it to you. In verse 19, If the one who consecrates it should ever wish to redeem the field, then he shall add to it 1/5 of your valuation price to it, so that it may pass to him. So again, the land can be redeemed at a 20% increase. What's the point of the increase? To deter, to discourage people from making hasty vows that they don't mean. Let your word be what it is. Verse 20 and 21. Yet if he will not redeem the field, but has sold the field to another man, this is where we're going to see that clause, it may no longer be redeemed. And when it reverts in the Jubilee, the field shall be holy to Yahweh, like a field set apart. It shall be for the priests as his property. So, humans are innovative, right? We're thinkers, some of us, not all of us. But some humans are innovative. And what we will do is we will make vows and figure ways around those vows to accomplish them, but in a way that's, how do I say, sneaky, shysty, self-serving. We want to work around the vow. So the idea here is you vow your land to the Lord. It's God's. Whatever comes in, that goes to the Lord. And then instead you go and you sell the plot of land, right? Because they've now valued the land. And let's say you sell the land, you lease it out, you take that leased money and you go and you pay the redemption price with that lease. You've now killed two birds with one stone. You kind of worked your way around the worship, and you were able to worship God in full, and yet you're able to vow the land. The idea was you snuck around and you didn't really feel the weight of the worship, because worship is costly. And you get your land back. God says if you vow your land and you lease it out or you sell it, you lose it permanently. You don't get it redeemed back in the year of Jubilee. And instead of the land reverting back to you, it goes to the priest permanently. So basically, if you want to skirt around and worship God in a way that's conniving, you lose altogether. So it was more than just a deterrent at this point. It was a keep through us. You better watch out, man. I've found that people still do this. People in the church. We find ways to worship God in skirmishing ways. Again, I've heard pastors say this and I always crack up because it's true. Typically, when people offer to the church, you know what they offer? Leftovers. Usually, not always, but by and far, people want to take the trash and say, hey, for the Lord. And it's true. I don't mean to laugh, but I crack up because it's so funny to see. Not in all cases, but in so many cases, people offer to the church what they have left over rather than giving to God out of the abundance or the good. To that, I would say just keep it. Keep it. It's cool, man. Give it to Goodwill. At least they might make something off of it. But when we offer to God, it should never be out of our trash. Amen. It should never be from our trash. That's not worship. The heart of David, King David, when he bought the hill from Orana, I can never say his name right, where the Temple Mount then existed later on, Orana wanted to give that to David. Remember, he says, I give it to the Lord. Or maybe we haven't seen it. We'll see it here at the end of 2 Samuel. David tells Orana, I won't accept this from your hand for nothing. I'll pay you the price of what it's worth. And then his statement is, I will not worship Yahweh with that which costs nothing. When I worship, it's going to cost me, he says. Because that's the essence of worship. Worship is costly. Today, do you know what it costs to worship? It didn't cost us a whole lot, but it cost the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ. Worship is costly, and it still costs us. It costs us time. It costs us gas. It costs us, it costs us to worship. Worship isn't just free, even though it appears free. Jesus made it so that it's free to us. It wasn't free. It's not free. There was a high price that was paid, which is why those who are his are no longer considered their own. They belong to the Lord. You are his slave. Worship is costly. And to think that we can worship the Lord with trash or with nothing is berserk. In this sense, that's the idea here being mentioned, is to skirt around real worship and to worship God in a way that's conniving, and it's a lie. And again, it's that whole killing two birds with one stone kind of deal. Verse 22 through 24. Or if he consecrates to Yahweh a field which he has bought, which is not part of the field of his own property, then the priest shall calculate for him the amount of your valuation up to the year of Jubilee, and he shall on that day give you your valuation as holy to Yahweh. In the year of Jubilee, the field shall return to the one from whom he bought it, to whom the possession of the land belongs. So on this one, let's say I bought a field. It's not of my own, it's not of the land grant that was given as they went into Jerusalem, because you can buy out somebody's field and in Jubilee it reverts. If I bought out a field for the sole purpose of offering it to the Lord in a vow, then the priest say, I shall pay the redemptive price up front, so that there is no skirting around. And in the year of Jubilee, that field reverts back to its original owner. Again, just God putting these stipulations in here. Verse 25. Every valuation of yours, moreover, shall be after the shekel of the sanctuary. The shekel shall be 20 gerahs. And the essence of that is the shekel is a standard weight. You should not use a different weight for this or a different weight for that. It is one weight altogether. So whenever a valuation is made, it's in good faith that everything is of equal weight. In verse 26, he says, however, a firstborn among animals, which as a firstborn belongs to Yahweh, no man may consecrate it. Whether ox or sheep, it is Yahweh's. Now, what is meant by that? If we were to back up, we remember in Exodus, God says, the first issue of every womb is mine. Male or female, man or beast, the first issue of the womb belongs to the Lord, particularly in the beast. And so what he's saying is, if a firstborn has come through, you can't offer that to the Lord. That would be like going into my house, stealing my watch, and then trying to give it back to me as a gift. It's mine. Give me my watch back. The firstborn animal belongs to God. You can't say, I'm going to set this apart for you, Lord. No, that's already mine. You can set apart something else, but you can't set that apart. It's already holy to God. Again, it's sad that God has to put these in here, but we know how innovative humans are. And again, this is a way to skirt around worshiping God. If you're giving God what's already his, and it's like, whew, I feel good about myself because I worship the Lord, got the deed done, and now the rest of these cattle are mine. No. That doesn't work that way, bro. That's already his. You got to give it up. You want to worship him? Cool. Give him one of these other ones. Well, wait. Oh, now you're digging too deep into my pocket there. You want to worship God or not? Because that's just giving him what's his. That's not an act. It's kind of like an act of worship. But is it a gift if you give me what already belonged to me? It's not really a gift, is it? And so you want to worship God, that's good. Worship him. But it's going to cost from your flock. This first one is already his, because he set that standard up. Verse 27, but if it is among the unclean animals, then he shall redeem it according to your valuation, and add to it 1/5 of it. And if it is not redeemed, then it shall be sold according to your valuation. So again, if an unclean animal is given of a firstborn, then either you redeem it by paying the price with 1/5, or it's given to the priest and the priest sell it for whatever it's valued at. And then, but that's the crazy thing, right? When the priests sell it, they sell you for the valuation to somebody else. But if you want it back, you have to pay 1/5. Again, the deterrent is, it's not even a deterrent at this point because it's a firstborn. But the idea is, like, you can't buy back your worship. You can't buy back what's already God's. And so if it gets sold elsewhere, it's for the valuation. But if you want to redeem it, you can, but at 1/5 of the at 1/5 above the valuation cost. Verse 28. Nevertheless, anything which a man sets apart to Yahweh out of all that he has, of man or of animal, or of the fields of his own property, shall not be sold or redeemed. Anything devoted to destruction is most holy to Yahweh. No one who may have been set apart among men shall be ransomed. He shall surely be put to death. Now, this one I had a little bit of trouble with as I was studying. Nothing that's set apart to the Lord, man or beast, shall be sold or redeemed if it was devoted to destruction. Now if you guys remember Joshua, the book of Joshua, when they go into Jericho, God tells them that the city is Corbin. It's under the ban. It's devoted to destruction. Do you guys remember that? You guys read through Joshua? If you read through Joshua, when they take Jericho, that's the command from God as before they go in. Touch nothing. Take nothing. Everything gets destroyed from this city. Everything. Beast, man, cattle, gold, nothing can be taken. But a guy named Achan sees some silver and some stuff and he's like, this is really nice. And he takes it. And he goes and he buries it because it was really nice, whatever it was that he took. And from that point on, God stops blessing Israel. Remember, they start getting mowed down by the Philistines and by the inhabitants of the land of Canaan. They start dying. And Joshua and the men, they freak out. Oh, Lord, you brought us here just to die. And God comes to him and he's like, hey, bro, look, somebody took from that city. And so they gather all the nations. They cast lots. They go to the tribe, to the house, and to the person. And it's Achan. What have you taken, bro? And Achan says, I'm so sorry. I took this. I saw it. I coveted it. I wanted it. You know what happens to Achan and his family? They die. And then they destroy that stuff, and then God goes with them again because they touched what was under the ban, what was wholly dedicated to God for destruction. God says, you don't touch that. You touch that, I'll remove myself altogether. When something was dedicated for destruction, there was no getting out of it. Now, the part that really bothered me was when he says here, where is it at? Out of all that he has of man or of animal of the fields. Now, how could a man be set apart for destruction? Right? Now, men can be offered up. We saw that as a vow. And they'd either serve in the temple or be redeemed. But how would a man, in this sense, be set apart for destruction? Because at this point, it means you are going to die. You can't offer a human because that's against God's law. That's against God's nature. You don't offer up human beings. But humans can be killed under certain circumstances. And so what I have pulled from this, from what I understand, is if a man did a crime worthy of death, he would, in essence, be offered up to God for destruction. In essence, you're going to die. It's capital punishment. May God have mercy on your soul kind of deal. So when you were declared Corbin, when you're declared for destruction, once that declaration was set in place, that couldn't be retracted. If you did something worthy of death, then death it was. That's what I believe that means. That's the only way, to me, this makes sense. Otherwise, mind blown, and I have no clue. In verse 29, he says, no one who may have been set apart among men shall be ransomed. He shall surely be put to death. And that's what I just said. Verse 30 through 32, thus all the tithe of the land, of the seed, of the land, of the fruit of the trees of Yahweh's, it is Yahweh's. It is holy to Yahweh. Therefore, if a man wishes to redeem part of his tithe, he shall add to it 1/5 of it. For every 10th part of the herd or flock, whatever passes under the rod, the 10th one shall be holy to Yahweh. Now, interesting, this is the first time tithe is mentioned in Leviticus. That's it, and it's only in this little section here. Now, what I find interesting about this is the tithe was something that was understood by the people of the lands. Even outside of Israel, if we were to back up 400 years, Abraham has an encounter with a man named Melchizedek, who is a priest and a king. And you know what Abraham does with this priest and king? The first thing he does is he takes 1/10 of his belongings and he offers it and gives it to Melchizedek. He gives him a tithe. And then they break bread and have wine, and symbolic picture of us in Christ. And then if we were to fast forward later, this is before Abraham ever had kids. Then we fast forward to Jacob in chapter 28, and Jacob vows to offer a tithe to Yahweh. And he offers the tithe. So the tithe was a common understanding of the lands when you would offer up to the Lord 1/10 of your increase, whatever that may be. Now, I've always taken the understanding that the tithe was the first 10th. But as we see, God is going to say it's the last 10th. Regardless, first, last, the idea is it's 1/10 portion of whatever is coming in. And in this sense, he says, of the field or of the flock or whatever it may be, the tithe shall be given to the Lord. However, if a man wished to redeem his tithe, so again, let's say the tithe is the 10th bull and you really like that bull, I want that particular bull, you could redeem it for a 20% increase. So they'd evaluate what that bull would be worth, and then you'd pay 20% on top of what it would be worth, not as the little baby, or probably evaluate it as a full-grown, imagine a full-grown bull is what I'd imagine it would be. But why the tithe? What was the purpose of the tithe? Numbers 18:21 tells us the purpose of the tithe. The purpose of the tithe was to upkeep the temple and to support the priests so that they could serve in the temple and upkeep the temple. It was how they lived, and they were able to live while serving the Lord. And again, the tithe kept the temple alive and well. Verse 33, he is not to be concerned whether it is good or bad, nor shall he exchange it. Take care, Michelle. You have a good night. Nor shall he exchange it. Where's it at? Or if he does exchange it, then both it and its substitute shall become holy. It shall not be redeemed. So he can't exchange it, which is odd because it just says he could buy it back. But I don't know what's meant by that. I'm going to be honest. It says you can buy back the tithe, but then it says it can't be exchanged. The 10th part, which is what it says, I don't know. I guess I didn't look into that enough. But he is not to be concerned whether it is good or bad, nor shall he exchange it. For if he does exchange it, then both it and its substitute shall become holy. It shall not be redeemed. It shall be given up to the Lord, and it shall be for the priests. Verse 34, these are the commandments which Yahweh has commanded Moses for the sons of Israel at Mount Sinai. Let me back up here because I suppose I missed a part. I guess the man could redeem a part of his tithe. I don't know what that means. But if you go back to verse 31, if therefore a man wishes to redeem part of his tithe, so it appears that like a bull couldn't be redeemed, but a portion of barley could be redeemed. A portion of whatever could be redeemed, it'd be valued, and then you'd put 20% on top of that. So that was my bad in that. But when it comes to a tithe of like a bull or a lamb, could not be redeemed, had to be given up. And if you tried to skirt around, whatever you tried to put in its place went to God also. So you lost both. The idea was, it is God's, you cannot retract it. Now, for the Christian, how does that work for us? This is a question I get often. Well, how does the tithe work in the church? And it's a fair question. The truth is, we are not commanded to tithe. Most pastors will tell you that's not true. You got to tithe. Let's go to Malachi. Got to pour out his blessings and blah, 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 blah. The truth is, in the New Testament church, we aren't told to tithe. We are told to give. And we are to give with a joyful heart. What does that look like? It's between you and God. I don't know. Now, why do churches present the tithe? Why do we talk about the tithe? I like the tithe. I think the tithe is a good principle, which is why I believe it's something God institutes. I think the tithe is good because it's a good standard. We take 90% and we offer up to God 10%. Well, what happens if my life's rough, and if I tithe, then I won't be able to go eat Arby's every day? That's between you and God. You're not commanded to do it. But I would say this. One of the things I like about the tithe is it keeps us in check. Keeps me in check. I tithe. It keeps me in check. It keeps me from ever thinking that money has me. Because there's times where I don't want to give to God. We're broke and I'm hurting. And I'm like, I don't want to give this, Lord. But I'll just give it. Like, you know what, God? What is it? It's just a little bit of money. It's just for you, Lord. Again, that little pinch shows me where I stand with God. Because when I allow that pinch to dictate how I offer to God, then that tells me that the things have me rather than me having things. I was talking to a friend, my wife and I, recently, and I was talking to her beforehand, and she was asking for help trying to get her books in order. Like, I need to learn how to save. I need to learn how to put money aside and blah, blah, blah. And so we sat down and wrote down all her bills, what she makes, all that good stuff. And then I told her after we had everything outlined, and she didn't have a lot of money, but I said, you really should consider tithing. She's like, I want to. I said, you should. I said, let me share with you my history in tithing. I can remember times where I wanted to give to God, but I had rent due. I had a car payment due, and I'm like, I don't even have the money for the payment. So me giving this puts me that much further behind, Lord. And I remember just thinking, look, man, I already don't have the money. Worst case, Here's the money, God. I'd rather give it to you, and whatever you do with it, cool. And I'll just never forget, like, somehow my bills always got paid. Always. I've never gone without where my bills didn't get paid. And I was just sharing that with her, and I was like, I know it probably sounds corny and like all Christianese is like, but I'm just telling you, like, that's my experience. And then it was cool because then my wife, the next day, we were talking again and going over the numbers, and I was like, you need to talk to my wife because she's better at this. So my wife takes everything I wrote out and rewrote it out nicer, better at penmanship, and more organized. And I'm just chilling there at the table studying while they're talking there at the other side of the table, and I'm just listening. And then when they get to like the end of all the bills, my wife starts telling her, you should tithe. And then she gives her the exact same story as mine, but her own personal experiences. And she'll talk about how when she would tithe, like she would sometimes be worried, like, I don't know how I'm going to pay rent or my car. And she looked at her and said, and my bills always got paid. And I stopped studying and I said, see, I didn't just make that up. And I told her because I didn't tell Stephanie anything. I was like, all I told her was, hey, like, so-and-so wants to talk to you. And I did my best, and you go over it because you're better. But I told her none of what our conversation was. And I told the girls, like, look, what she just told you was her experience. We didn't talk about what we talked about yesterday. I was like, listen, this is God confirming to you. When you trust him, dude, he'll bless you. He does. He really does. And am I saying you all should tithe? No. That's between you and God. Should you give? Yeah, you should give. What? I don't know. That's between you and God. What I do know is God is faithful. And again, why do I like tithing? I like tithing because it's a way that shows me that things don't have me. And it's a way that I get to trust God, that even when I don't understand, Lord, I'm just going to trust you. So again, does the Christian have to tithe? No. Should the Christian tithe? If they want to. Should the Christian give? Yes. What should the Christian give? You vow that between you and God. But I'll tell you this, whatever you vow to give to God, give to God. And if you can't vow to give to God and keep that vow, then don't. It's better to not make the vow at all. But what happens if I don't give it all? Then you're all right. Life goes on. You don't have to give. Should you give? Yes. Do you have to give? The Bible just says when you give with a joyful heart. That's all it does say. And for the New Testament. But that's the book of Leviticus. That was an exciting book. That was actually so much more exciting than I thought it was going to be. Next week, we're going to open up the book of Numbers and continue through the Pentateuch, or Torah. Father, we thank you for being our God, and we thank you for your faithfulness. We pray, Lord, that you would stir your spirit up in us, Father, that we be men and women of our word, that we would accomplish the things that are on our tongue, that we speak forth, that we do what we say we're going to do and not do the things we say we're not going to do. May we be faithful in our vows to you, or else not make them. I pray, Father, that you would bless us as we go forward into this coming weekend, as you prepare our hearts for what you have for us. Lord, help us to be attentive to your word, to hear your voice clearly. Help us to do what it is that you will for our lives. Help us to accomplish, Lord, your will for us. To not look to the left or to the right, but to look up to you. I thank you for this beautiful body of people. Would you bless them? Would you protect them? Would you keep them safe, Lord? In Jesus' name, amen.